Up next, we have Josh Linerode. Josh has been working as the professional academic advisor at Lake Erie College in Painesville, Ohio for the last 4 years. Josh serves as a primary academic advisor for exploratory and college credit plus students, as well as students interested in pursuing individualized majors. Josh earned his master's degree in counseling from Youngstown State University, bachelor's degree from the University of Mount Union, majoring in interdisciplinary studies with focuses in education, psychology, and sociology. Earlier this year, Josh earned his certification in appreciative advising. When not working in academic advising, you can find Josh reading a book, performing with local community theaters, or attending theater performances. Josh is also an avid fan of Disney, mythology, and pop culture. Josh, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
And so we've actually connected through Instagram, through the Adventures in Advising IG. So go follow that if you're listening at Advising Podcast. And, we've kind of figured out that we both love pop culture. We both love advising. We got to meet very briefly at the Cincinnati conference, the NACADA annual conference that was just a few weeks ago. But before we get into a lot of that, listeners usually want to know who's the guest. So who is Josh? Can you talk about your path into higher ed and academic advising?
Sure. So when I first started in my undergrad, I was originally going to be a major in middle childhood education to try and teach science and social studies. I did my first in-classroom experience and I said, no, thank you. So I just learned that wasn't for me. And I found that I had a really good connection with those that worked in student affairs because I was on residence life. Went off to grad school because I knew I wanted a counseling background with student affairs, found the program at Youngstown State. And then I made some really cool connections with the academic advising staff there. I interned with them, and that's what led me to where I am today. Plus, I had some amazing advisors when I was in my undergraduate as well. I just didn't put that connection together until I started my grad school career.
Yeah, it's almost like you reflect back on it. You're like, oh yeah, they helped
makes
tell
total
me.
sense
Yeah,
now.
right. During the time, it doesn't. You just feel like you're going all over the place. But then you look back and you're like, okay, it wasn't a straight line, but everything
Eventually
led
got
to
there.
everything led to where it needed to go. Now, when you had your original major, was that something you were thinking about doing for like a long time?
Originally, I wanted to be a teacher since like third grade.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, I want to be a teacher. That like this is what I know what I wanted to do. Like before that, it was to be a paleontologist.
Mm-hmm.
So went from that to wanting to be a teacher. So it was kind of I had a mild identity crisis whenever I'm like, you know what, teaching is not for me.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just finding that path from there. So luckily I had some awesome support in my undergrad.
Nice. Yeah, I'm just kind of thinking back to when I was an undergrad, and yeah, I started out at the community college, but every class I took, I was interested in it. I was like, oh, I want to do this now as my career. Like I take a English class, I want to be an English teacher or a writer, and then not really realizing how many other careers paths you can go into with an English degree. And then I was almost set on math for a long time, and then it was my junior year. I was transferred over to Cal State San Bernardino, and then I was like, I think I want to change my major. My EOP counselor was like, okay, you need to make a decision like right now because registration's coming up and you don't want to delay your graduation. But yeah, advisors really do make a huge difference.
Oh yeah.
So now you're at Lake Erie College. You've been there now for a few years. Can you talk about, for those that may not know about your college, can you talk about your institution?
Absolutely. So Lake Erie College is a very small private liberal arts institution in Painesville, Ohio. So we're about 30 to 45 minutes east of Cleveland. When we opened in 1856, we were originally an all women's seminary school. That's like a little fun fact about us. And then we became co-ed in the 1980s. So we have over 35 majors on campus. 4 of those majors are actually equine majors. So we have dedicated majors to working with horses. And we have our own horse facility about 15, 20 minutes away from campus. So it's a pretty cool little place to be.
Yeah, sounds like, and definitely has a lot of history. Now I'm thinking like if anyone like wants a tour of the campus or just wants to know more, it's like they will get a lot of different facts, a lot of fun facts that they can share with others. And so your role right now, you're an academic advisor.
Mhm.
You work with various populations, so exploratory, college credit plus students. Can you talk more about your role and what that entails?
Absolutely. So I'm actually the professional advisor on campus.
Ah,
So
okay.
when people talk about professional advising offices, I'm like, yeah, that's me.
That's me and only me.
Yeah. So while I'm assigned to those dedicated populations of exploratory, college credit plus, and like the individualized majors, I'm also able to advise just about any of our other programs that we have on campus. I work with students. I'm like, okay, here's how things fit in a degree plan. However, based on the course content, it's probably going to be better to talk to the people that teach that content area simply because they know the workload better than I do. Because I found that students really appreciate when you're just upfront and honest with them of, you know what, yes, I can tell you this stuff, but I'm not an expert in this field. So let's get you in contact with one of the faculty advisors. Because once a student declares a major, they are given a faculty advisor. So I do all that stuff. Another role that I have is with our NCAA athletics. So we're about 75% NCAA student athletes. So I'm also the one that works with them on their eligibility from the academic side. So I wear many a hat. It's very fun. It's never a boring day. It's always an adventure.
Sounds like. Now, were you I guess with the professional advisor role, like, was there already someone in that place and then they left and then you took their place, or are
Mhm.
you like the first one, that kind of came into this role?
So there was somebody originally in this position. She had left the institution for another opportunity, and then I ended up coming in. So I think it was almost a pretty quick turnaround between her leaving and me starting. So yeah.
So as you being like the professional advisor, what was your training like, if any, when you
So
started?
the most beneficial experience that I had with my training is that I actually got to sit down with all of the deans for the different departments and was like, okay, what do I need to know about your school, your programs? Tell me what I need to know. So that was very helpful. Also, I'm right across the hall from the registrar's office. They are a delight and a half. There's a joke around campus that I'm a part of their office by proxy because we work so closely together. Um, so I like to describe Lake Erie College as just one big family. So we all know each other. We may not work together every day, as in like seeing each other face to face, but we're able to pick up the phone and call one another and be like, "Hey, here's what's going on. How can I help? Can you help?" That type of thing.
Yeah, and you mentioned family, and sometimes using the term family at work usually has a negative connotation to it sometimes, but it seems like in this case, since you're connected pretty much to all these other departments, it's like you really have to kind of collaborate and work with others and really get to know them, and everyone seems to be friendly with one another as well.
Yeah, obviously, like in any workspace, there are going to be times where we clash, that type of thing. But
Sure.
what's nice with building the connections that we have here on campus is that we're able to have hard conversations and be
Mhm.
like, hey, like, I don't necessarily agree with this. How can we work this out? And having those connections make those conversations easier.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, you work with college credit plus students. That's one of the groups. What exactly is college credit plus students?
So the College Credit Plus program was also known as post-secondary, the post-secondary option. So those are high school students that are taking college courses. So I'm the advisor for that to make sure that they are on track to meet all of their high school graduation requirements while also preparing them for potential majors that they have in the future.
Nice. And so wearing all these hats, you have all these different student groups that you have to work with. Are you also doing orientation as well?
Uh huh. Sure am. So, because we are so small, we can't offer every single class every single semester.
Mhm.
So for orientations, I'm actually the one registering all of our new incoming students. So we pre-register all of them. Then when they attend orientation, if there's any conflicts or just like, you know what, I'm not feeling this class, we work with them on updating their schedule to the best of our ability. So that's my big summer project that I do is pre-registering all of our new incoming students.
Sounds like fun. But it seems like a lot of institutions, like our institution, has done that now. We started last year with the pre-enrollment. So I guess like with you having done it now, um, is there anything that you've learned from like year to year that's made it easier with pre-registering these students?
So something that helped me is that I send out an email to faculty before the end of the spring semester, and we're like, okay, based off of what's being offered, what should a first semester student in your program be registered for? What are the priority classes? So faculty send me a list of one, two, sometimes three classes of, okay, somebody majoring in this has to be in these classes, and these classes are non-negotiable. So what I do when I do these registrations is I pull up, we call it there's a joke between the registrar's office and me, we call it a spreadsheet of nastiness because it's just so much information, it can be kind of overwhelming. I go through that spreadsheet and I'm like, okay, here are all the majors. I register them for those priority classes first, and then we start plugging in gen ed core classes from there so that we can get them to full-time 15, 16 credits.
Yeah. So was it spreadsheet of nastiness? Yeah, I'm gonna remember that one.
Like I said, we like to have fun. So like all of our spreadsheets have a different nickname.
No, that is awesome. But I think anyone listening can totally get it, where it's like they might get here's this Excel sheet or here's this, data you find online, and it's so much, and you're like, well, I just need to get this piece,
Oh yeah.
and how do I get to that? And a lot of sorting and all of that. So, um, yeah, my mind is I'm stressing out now just thinking about it, but we'll move on from that. So let's talk about you have a certification in appreciative advising.
Yes.
How did you find out about this certification? How long was it for? Uh, how does this help you with your students now?
So I just did a random like Google search because I happened to hear from about appreciative advising through the grapevine.
Mhm.
So I did a search on it and I'm like, ooh, it sounds really cool. Um, so I took the class through the Florida Atlantic University online um, professional development opportunity that was taught by Dr. Jenny Bloom. So, which I had the opportunity to meet her at the conference, and it was really fun. So I took the class and I found out it was something that you can actually get certified in. And originally, I wasn't going to apply for the certification. I'm like, you know what? I'm content with just doing the class, having the completion with it. But then I thought about what I tell my students to push yourself further than what you originally set your expectations to. So to push myself further, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to practice what I preach to my students. Apply for this, see what happens. The worst they can tell me is no. And a couple months later, or a couple weeks later, I got the email saying that I was approved, that my application was approved. And that was in May. That's when I got my 5-year certification. And then in September, they sent out an email saying that the certification was actually updated to a lifetime certification.
Whoa, that is awesome.
Yeah.
Did you get to see Dr. Bloom at the Cincinnati conference?
I did. I went to the appreciative advising community, and I had like the nerd that I am. I had the textbook with me that she authored, and I'm like, so can I be a complete nutter nerd and ask you to sign this? And she's like, absolutely. She signed it, and then at the end, I'm like, okay, can I nerd out even more and ask to get a picture taken with you? And she's like, absolutely. So Dr. Bloom is a delight and a half.
Oh my
So
goodness.
I posted on my social media. I'm like, I got to meet Dr. Bloom, and here's why this is really cool. So it was a lot of fun.
Oh yeah. So Dr. Bloom was the keynote for Region Nine's conference. I think it was 20. 2018. It was in Santa Rosa, California,
Okay.
and she was the keynote, and it was like one of the most amazing keynotes. I mean, Nakata is great with picking their keynotes, but Jenny Bloom was amazing,
Mhm.
and I always remember one of the things that she was talking about was, when you are in your office, it's like, do you have things that relate to you? Do you have things that relate to the university? And she said, when was the last time you actually sat where your students sit,
Mhm.
and what do they see? And I never thought about that.
Mhm.
And when I got back to the office, I sat where my students sat, and I realized this chair is very uncomfortable, and got a new chair. Um, thankful for budget during that time. We were able to get something, and then also I just looked around and I was like, okay, where my students see things, it's like blank walls, like there's nothing. So I went to the bookstore, got some CSUSB swag, a pennant to put on the wall, and then I was like, let me bring some stuff from home. Like it just felt like it was like this hospital room, just
Yeah.
very basic. And so it's like, let me personalize it. And, such a small little thing, but can really make a big difference. And I think that's also led to some great conversations with some of my students when they see some of the like pop culture stuff and things like that. Although I may have too much stuff in my office, I might need to get rid of it because we need to get back about talking about advising and their classes. But yeah, I mean, awesome keynote that she did, and I saw her a couple times at the conference. But then as I was going to walk up and say, hey, I'm a big fan. Then there's like someone else that walked up, and then they had a conversation. I was like, okay, let me go the other way.
Yeah. I actually, speaking of like, what do students see when they walk into your office? I actually pulled students into my office. It was like, hey, what does my office say about me? What do you think of my office? That type of thing. And they flat out told me. So when they walk into my office, they can obviously tell that I'm a Disney fan. So like right over my shoulder, like I have a Be Our Guest sign from Beauty and the Beast, and I have the Powerline poster from a Goofy movie. I also have one from the Disney movie Hercules on my other wall, and so students are able to tell that stuff about me. And I've actually been told I have one of the most comfortable set of chairs on campus for an office. So I'm like, okay, that works.
Yeah, that probably means students are like, I want to go see Josh and just hang out and just chat.
Yeah.
And then you also have a love for Funko Pops as well, right?
Oh yeah, I've been told it's an obsession.
Yeah, I've seen some of your posts, and then I'm like, yep, I totally get it. They they do a great job with getting all the nostalgic feel
Oh yeah,
and back from like childhood, and it's like, I don't need it, but I feel like I need it, and
it's really nice.
here's my money, just take it.
See, I've had family members say that they just don't get it, and I'm like, you know what? It's not for you to get.
Right.
If this is for me. Also, I could be spending my money on worse things. So if I
That
want
is
to spend
true.
money on the 50th anniversary Mickey Mouse Funko Pop,
Mhm.
which is being delivered today, I'm going to do so.
Oh yeah, no, I was one when they originally came out. I was like, this is the stupidest thing. Like, who
Mhm.
wants these? And I bought my first one, and then a second one, and then the third one, and now I have all these extra ones. I have no room for it, so now I need to like kind of like cycle them out. But do you have it? Do you have any in your office that students see as well?
I have one. So I have the Mickey Mouse Jungle Cruise Funko Pop. I did have a couple other ones in my office. The if you've seen the movie Inside Out, all the different emotions. Because a student heard that I love Funko Pops, and she decided to go out of her way to buy me that set. So it was a very nice gift. I was very surprised and delighted by it. Um, so it was, like I said, just as a thank you, because it was a very stressful time, and I have an open door policy with my office. And I'm like, hey, if you ever just want to come in and chill and listen to like Disney music or Broadway show tunes, I got you.
Mhm.
Um, so as a thank you, they were like, hey, here you go. I'm like, oh, I was not expecting this. So I had those in my office for a little bit. But when I moved up here from Youngstown in 2017, I had like 7.
Mhm.
I now have 312.
Uh,
So yeah.
Yeah, way more than I have. I thought I had a lot, but it just also just shows you how many Funko Pops they have made.
Well, when they updated the app, it had like their entire catalog on it. There's like
Mhm.
23,000 things under the Funko umbrella. So when my coworkers or friends or family are like, you know what, you have too many of these, I'm like, hey, this is how many I have. Here's how many has been released. I'm not that bad.
Yeah, yeah. Now, I mean, whether it's Funko Pops and playing Disney music, Disney things on the wall, did you think like this could be a great way to connect with my students and kind of incorporate that into academic advising?
So when I first got to my office, I wanted to try and decorate it in a way that allowed students to see a little bit more about me rather than me just having the obligatory degrees on my wall, which I have that stuff too. But I didn't want my office to be just that. Um, so also have like all my textbooks from my undergrad from what I studied, and same with grad school. I also have like some little personal mementos that I got just growing up. Also, both of my grandfathers were in the military, so I actually have a copy of their military photos in my office with a patch and a button from their uniforms. So, unfortunately, my grandfathers are no longer with us, so that's also a nice little tribute to them. So, I tried to pull things into my office and be like, okay, what could be a conversation starter with students to try and break the ice a little bit before we start having advising conversations.
Yeah, and do you find that that's worked for the most part with a lot of your students?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And that's also a great way, like, we're talking about your grandfather's nice way to honor them as well. So, not just having, the pop culture stuff, but then also having things that, are personal with family as well. So that's really nice. Now, we were talking a little bit earlier about, Dr. Bloom meeting her at the Cincinnati conference. So let's dive into the NACADA annual conference that was in Cincinnati. Now, for you, this was your first professional conference ever, right?
It was
And how was
so
it?
exciting.
Yeah.
So when I first was approved to do my registration, I couldn't stop talking about it. Like, I'm so excited. It's only this much longer until I'm able to go. Like, I was a kid in the candy, like getting ready to go to the zoo, candy store, insert exciting thing here. So I'm sure my coworkers were excited to be like, okay, he's finally gone. We can finally stop hearing about it. But they were also all very excited for me because they knew how anxious and excited I was with it. And I know when I was planning out the sessions that I wanted to go to, I'm like, okay, what type of experience do I want to have? So I went through all the sessions, found what spoke to me with that. And then while at the conference, I heard speakers that I'm like, you know what? I want to meet this person and at least introduce myself, say hi, and get to know them. So I made sure I took the time to find an opportunity to meet Dr. Melinda Anderson, who is so much fun. Like, as soon as she did her speech, I'm like, I want to be her friend. So she was a lot of fun. Then also Dr. Kyle Ross. I ran into him and we talked about community theater a little bit because that was mentioned in the welcome on the first day. So I'm like, okay, these are people that I want to meet. So I made sure that I found the time to go out and meet them. Also, Joan, who is amazing. So I think they said there were like 1,400, no, yeah, 1,400 people in person at the conference. And I know I kind of stick out like a sore thumb because I'm almost 7 foot tall. But every time I saw her, she was just like, "Hey, Josh, how's it going? Like, how are you enjoying yourself?" That type of thing. Which I know she's super busy doing 5 million other things, but her just saying a simple hello and remembering my name like made me feel great. So those opportunities were really cool to have.
And we're talking about Joan from the executive office?
I believe she's with the executive office. So
Yeah,
she was at
so
the check-in registration table
yeah.
most of the time, and then we saw her running around.
Oh, yeah. No, yeah, so that's probably a Joan Crush, amazing, amazing person, and yeah, for someone to, be checking in all of these individuals and then remember your name and see you later and, still remember your name, I think that just one shows what a great memory that she has, but then also like just the attention to detail and making it very personal for the attendees there. And so yeah, so shout out to Joan for that. And you were mentioning Melinda and Kyle. Um, yeah, I mean, I don't know if anyone that has said anything negative about them. It's like everything is always positive with those individuals, which is great because they're Nakata leaders,
Mhm.
and yeah, they are just such a joy to chat with, and they're so full of knowledge, and they make you feel special, And I think that's what's great about them, and they make you feel proud to be part of Nakata, of that organization. Now, it was your first professional conference that you went to, but also for Lake Erie, it was the first time they were represented in a sense, right?
Yeah, so this was our first time being represented at annual conference. So that was a really cool experience to be able to represent my institution with that. It's like, especially with us being so small, just getting our name out there and just having fun with that as well.
Yeah. So I'm sure your colleagues were just excited for you to go, but then also it's like, hey, our college is being represented. And hopefully that's a continued thing, both at region conferences, at annual, maybe at the international conference at some point. Nakata Institute, there's always something that Nakata has that your college can be part of. So that's really great. And speaking of the conference, you took advantage of being able to attend a lot of the sessions. Do any of them stand out as ones that you went to that you're like, this was great, I can take something back to my institution, or I learned a lot to grow professionally?
So some of my favorite ones that I attended that were like the first ones that I put on my agenda through the app was the What Had Happened Was the Power of Storytelling, presented by Jesse Rosenberg. Traveling the Hero's Journey with our exploratory students with Matthew Eng, and then the Zero Inbox Advising with Katie Mosier. So those were the ones that were some of the first ones that I put on my agenda just based off of the description. And then I certainly was not disappointed whenever I went to the sessions themselves. So it was really cool to go to those. And I really like sessions that make me laugh. I'm a goofy, odd person. My students call me that. I'm like, yes, I am. So when we can just have that laid back, have fun, laugh type of presentations, I'm all for it. So I'm glad that those ones that were some of the first that I put on my agenda were ones that I was able to laugh and chuckle and just have a good time with.
Nice. And if anything, too, a lot of those sessions were either pre-recorded before the conference or recorded at the conference. And so you can probably find those on the Nakata app if you did attend, whether it was virtual or in person. So I believe they said it's available for like the 45 days. So I think that'll go
I
to the
think they said to
beginning
the
of
beginning
June.
of
Yeah.
December. So I
Yeah.
think I'm definitely going to try and rewatch a couple of those.
Mhm.
I've also sent a couple of them to a couple of the sessions that I attended to coworkers because
Mhm.
because some of my coworkers I went over my schedule with.
Mhm.
They're like, "Oh, that sounds really interesting. This sounds really interesting." So I'm like, "Hey, in case you're interested, here you go."
Yeah, and I think that's a great way too, especially like if it's any institution where maybe they're only able to send one person or two individuals. It's like as much as you want to be able to attend sessions that relate to what you want to do or you want to learn or what responsibilities you have in the office. It's like, well, what else is out there that could relate to one of my colleagues, that they didn't get to go, but maybe they can benefit from a session. So
Absolutely.
yeah, I think that's a great way to just kind of look at it from all viewpoints and help out. I mean, because that's kind of one of the goals, right? Is you attend the conference, can you bring anything back to your institution and help your students? Whether it's a policy change or just how you interact with your students. There's
Mhm.
always something that can be learned from those conferences. And I guess speaking of takeaways, were there any takeaways that you had from the conference?
So the biggest takeaway that I had was trying to make academic advising as fun as possible, making it an enjoyable experience for our students. Because I think academic advising, yes, it is a professional experience. We should be able to make it a professional experience for our students and encourage students to try and use it as like their first professional meeting to relate it to what they're going to have in their future and their future careers. However, with me, I want to also try and make academic advising as fun as possible. So I think that was really solidified when I was at the conference, and some of the takeaways that I took away is just making it a really fun, cool, enjoyable experience. Um, yeah.
Yeah, nice. And yeah, I mean, it's it's kind of like, how do you make advising fun? How do you get the students as engaged as possible? And I think, yeah, you found great takeaways from the conference, but I think you're already doing a lot of great things already yourself with your students where, hey, they want to see you all the time. So I think you got something going on there. And I guess for future conferences, this was your first experience at a professional, at a advising conference. There's going to be, region conferences next year, annual conference next year. Maybe there's an international conference next year. So for those that are continuing to plan for these conferences, do you have any advice for them as they plan next year's conference and beyond? Like whether it's what was great that probably should stay, or things that you might think they might not think of in terms of changing?
So I think a really important thing when you're planning a conference, whether it be annual, international, or the regional conferences, is going to end up being, if you were attending this conference not knowing anything, what would you want to get out of the experience, and trying to offer opportunities like that throughout the conference itself. Um, so I think it's just important to put yourself in the shoes of the people that you're going to be serving in a way, um, and putting yourself in that situation, and then try to build everything up from there. And also with the city that we're in, what makes that city, and how can we incorporate that into the conference experience? Because I know during this year's annual conference in Cincinnati, a lot of us, we did trips to Fountain Square, which Grater's ice cream, fantastic. Um, so we did trips throughout the city itself. I know a bunch of people posted pictures that they walked the bridge that I think goes into Kentucky. So incorporating those types of things into the conference for people to enjoy. Um, so I know that I am an Ohio native, but there are some things about Cincinnati that I didn't know. So maybe something to consider for future conferences is throwing out there for attendees to be like, hey, here's what makes the city the city. We recommend visiting XYZ, and giving them the opportunity with that, because that can also tie in the local businesses, the mom and pop shops, and try and get them involved in the conference itself. Because like we said earlier, there were 1,400 people live in person in Cincinnati. And I think they said 13, 14 countries were represented. So tying in those shops and restaurants and that type of thing that are in the city kind of puts it out on the global level as well, because not everybody is going to be able to have those experiences when they go back home. So I think that's something to keep in mind with future conferences if you're planning them.
Absolutely. No, that's fantastic advice. And for next year's annual conference, will be in Portland. So I think that's something great, is to, implement a lot of, well, what is Portland? What's the history behind Portland? Even how advising has been done in Oregon and specifically in Portland. And maybe a lot of the different shops. I mean, they're known for coffee and donuts and a lot of great food. So, a lot of travelers want to know what's the nice spots and to go to. So I think there's a lot we can do, and maybe some videos maybe leading up to the conference, kind of highlighting a lot of that. So, I appreciate that. And speaking of Portland, I think you're planning to go to Portland, but you haven't traveled that far west, right?
Yeah, I haven't, if I remember correctly, I haven't traveled further west than Indiana. So with me being in Ohio, it's not that far. So I'm really excited to be able to go and just be able to say, hey, I went all the way across the country for that. And also, if I'm ever blessed enough to be able to go to one of the global conferences, I would love to be able to do that, because my only international experience is going to Niagara Falls on the Canada side. So yeah, so hopefully that's in the cards for the future as well.
Yeah, cross my fingers for you on that, for sure for Portland, because that'll be the next one. But yeah, international conferences I think are fantastic. I've only been to one. I've been to the one in Belgium, and that was in 2019. And was so looking forward to Greece, and then it got canceled and became a virtual conference. But
I would have loved to have went. I'm a
yeah,
big Greek mythology nerd, so being able to go to Greece would have been fantastic.
well, maybe they'll have it again, or actually have it for the first time, I guess, one of these years, and then you can go. Yeah, I was all planning. I was going to go to like Santorini, and then yeah. But let's talk about mythology. As we kind of wind down with this conference, has that been an interest of yours for like many years, like as a kid, or how did that start?
So my gateway to mythology was the Disney movie Hercules. So I'm
Hmm.
like, ooh, this is really cool. Let me read more about it. So I started reading Greek mythology in third grade. So as soon as I was approved to be able to go to that section of the elementary school library, I'm like, that's where I'm going to be. Then I realized Greek mythology is nothing like the Disney movie. So that was quite the shock for me. But I just never stopped reading it. So I just found it really interesting. So the librarians, because I also went to a very small school, K through 12 is still one building. My graduating class was 53 people, and we were one of the bigger classes. So we all knew each other. So the librarians, they always knew, like, okay, Josh is going to go directly for the Greek mythology books. I read the same books like 25 times. Um, by the time I was in junior high or early high school, when we were reading the Odyssey in our English class, I had already read it like 4 or 5 times beforehand. So some of my classmates were coming up to me like, "What did we just read?" I'm like, "Okay, here's what happened," and just trying to explain it in a way that my peers were able to understand. So Greek mythology has been a big part of my life since third grade. I've since expanded to other mythologies such as Roman, which is pretty similar to Greek, um, Egyptian, Norse. I eventually want to get into Native American, Aztec, Mayan, a little bit of everything, at least to have that baseline foundation. So, um, which that's why I really enjoyed going to the session that talked about the hero's journey, that Matt presented, because the hero's journey you can find in mythologies and also other stories. Because he showed the beginning of a video that was like, what does Harry Potter, Katniss Everdeen from the Hunger Games, and Frodo from the Lord of the Rings, what do they all have in common? And it talked about the hero's journey and how it relates to mythology and all, but also how it relates to pop culture. Um, so that's why I really enjoyed going to that session, because one of the handouts talked about the Odyssey. Um, so yeah, mythology's always been a big part of what I've been interested in reading. I also read a bunch of fantasy stuff, which stems from the mythological point of everything. So it's always been a fun and exciting thing.
Well, maybe there's a future presentation proposal that you could
Maybe.
do on that. So
I
maybe it's
have
for
been thinking about presenting next year, so maybe that will make an appearance.
yeah, maybe for Portland. I think proposals open up in December, so something to
Good to
to consider.
know.
And then also just speaking of like mythology and its connections, with advising Matt's presentation, someone else you might want to connect with is Dr. Peter Hagen.
Yes.
So,
So
yep.
wait, he wrote the narrative storytelling one, right?
Yep.
I met him briefly.
Yes.
So he was in Matt's session with the hero's journey. And I actually ended up buying his book on narrative storytelling and academic advising. So right after, I was like, hey, can I get your signature on your book? And he was like, absolutely. And he seemed to be completely baffled that I even asked. So just in that brief conversation, I could tell he was a really cool guy. And I'm really excited to get to the point to be able to read his book.
Yeah, and it's nice. It's 7 chapters. I think it's when you get to chapter 6, I think he does something very cool with it. So I won't spoil it, but you'll see.
No
But it basically,
spoilers.
yeah, but it
It's
ties
like the new
in.
Marvel
Yeah,
movie. Don't talk
it,
about it.
it ties in chapters 1 through 5 very nicely in a great way. So I can't wait to talk to you about that later
Yeah.
when you do read it. And then as we finish up, I mean, one of the things too is like you do a lot of theater, whether it's performing at local community theaters or attending a lot of the performances. Talk about that.
So I'm a big advocate for self-care. It's something that I'm constantly preaching to my students that you have to take care of yourself. So community theater, performing, and then also attending live theater, whether it be community theater or going to Playhouse Square in downtown Cleveland, Ohio. That's kind of my self-care outlet. So I've been in 2 theater productions since moving up here to the Cleveland area. In 2018, I was in Shrek the Musical. And then in 2019, I was in the show Anything Goes. 2020, we were supposed to do Beauty and the Beast, but there's this magical thing called a global pandemic that kind of put a halt to that. So that's been pushed back to 2022. So this year we're doing a dinner theater fundraiser to raise money to do Beauty and the Beast. So, which I'll actually be performing in that. So it's pretty cool. It's like a little showcase of different musical numbers. So I'm really cool. It's really exciting to do.
Nice. And you mentioned Anything Goes. So my mind I first think of is Indiana Jones Temple of Doom with that song. But I think this was a fantastic interview, and I feel like I know so much more. And I'm glad that we got we got to use this to talk more versus
Yeah.
like the couple minutes that we had at the poster session
Yeah.
at the conference. But if anyone wants to reach out to you, they want to talk more about your role at your college, or they want to chat about pop culture, how can they reach out to you?
So you can reach me via email. So my email address is jlinerode. So my last name, so JLIN as in Nancy, ERODE at lec.edu. So yeah, shoot me an email anytime.
All right, sounds good. All right, I'm sure we'll be chatting soon. Thanks a lot for being on the podcast today, Josh.
Thank you so much for having me.